Hi, and welcome back to my Guitar Pro tutorials. My name is Ryan. If you haven't been following along, I have a whole playlist of tutorials for Guitar Pro that you can very quickly get your feet wet. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. I've got a ukulele here, and I'm going to show you how to tab out a ukulele chart for Jurassic Park. Now, this is obviously not my song, but this is just an arrangement I kind of came up with that's only 4 measures long. Real easy to play if you play ukulele. This is kind of a fun version of it. And I'm going to use some different cymbals here that we haven't used before. And I'm going to use some chord charts. And obviously, we're going to do this for ukulele, not guitar. So something a little new. So let's get going. Okay, so now that we're in full screen here, we're going to create a new file, and you can always do that 2 different ways by clicking on File, New, or clicking the plus button over here. I'm going to click File, New. And what we're going to do different than from my other tutorials is we're going to pick a ukulele. So if you don't immediately see it here, it's because you got to click Other, and then Ukulele, and then Create. And if you want to make any changes in here, how it's displayed, you can, but I'm going to leave everything on their defaults, tablature, and standard notation. If you're just doing this for fun, you're not familiar with ukulele, it's got a different tuning. It's only 4 strings. This is known as C6 tuning, it has G, C, E, A. If you have a hard time remembering that, Good Cows Eat Apples is a good one to remember, G, C, E, A. Anyway, so we're going to make this a little bit bigger so I can see it better. And then we're going to start with the title, Jurassic Park theme for ukulele. I'll just put JPT for Jurassic Park theme so you can see when I switch back and forth pretty easily. All right, so JPT. And the first thing we see in our song is the time signature is 4/4. We have defaulted to 4/4, no change needed. And our first note is 3rd fret on the A string with some 8th notes. So we got 3rd fret, 2nd fret. And we're going to go into the tab. And something worth mentioning here is it's capable of inputting notes in the tab or inputting notes in the standard notation. You can simply click on the staff that you want, or you can hit tab on your keyboard to switch between the two. I had a couple comments recently where I think that would have fixed that person's issue had they known that. So it's worth knowing. All right, so we're going to go 3 on the keyboard, and to get an 8th note, I'm going to hit minus. Now, if you hit the minus key and you noticed it went to a half note, that means that your preferences aren't the same as mine. You can fix that by going to File, Preferences, and then where it says, let's see, we got to go to Interface, and then where it says plus minus keys behavior, it needs to say longer, shorter. If you've been watching my videos, you already see me do this. It's default shorter, longer. So basically this just flip-flops what the minus and plus keys do for the rhythm. Okay, so we got an 8th note. And again, we just used the minus key to get that. All right, now it should stay on 8th note for the next note. So hit right on the keyboard and a 2. We've got our first couple of notes. Now to do this chord, I could do it a couple different ways. I usually opt to do the tab first. So I'll just go 0, 0, 0, 3, and then quick shortcut here is A for the chord chart. And I am going to change the fingering by right-clicking on the 1. And I often will do ring finger for this, but you could choose to do a middle finger if you choose, however you want to do it, and then hit OK. The other way I could have done this too is, let's go back a step, let's get rid of this. I could have just moved over my arrow key to the next beat, hit A, and then since it's such a common chord, I could just go to the naming tool here. This was another comment I got recently. It was, hey, I don't want to input them one at a time. So you could just go to the naming tool and then find the chord you want. Now, obviously, this is a different way to play C. So if you don't want to play this more complex way to play C, then you can just click through the alternative ways to play it, which funny enough, the easiest way is not in here. Or you could fix it by, let's go back to that first one. You could fix it by simply just clicking where you want your fingers to go. All right, so just a couple ways to do it. And then we want this, I believe, a quarter note, right? So we're gonna hit the plus. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about the squiggly line. What does that even mean? Well, when you're playing a stringed instrument, normally when you hit a chord, you kind of hit everything at once almost. But in reality, you are hitting these strings one at a time, but it's so fast that it just sounds like one strum. But what this squiggly line is telling us to do is make it a little bit more like that. So we want to add that because it does sound different. and we're going to go into our left menu here. What do we call this? We call this the addition palette, but it's really just the manual way to enter in a lot of the things I do with shortcuts. So you can see the symbol right here. There's one that's pointing down and one that's pointing up. We actually want the one that is pointing up. Okay. And then you could play with this a little bit. It's only going to affect what it sounds like in the program, but as the way it looks, it doesn't change a bit. So we're just going to add that in there like that, and we'll get this out of here. So you might be wondering if you know anything about tablature and you've played with tablature, you might notice that this is an up arrow. And if you could see me in the small camera, you could see me strumming down. And the reason for that is the way that the tab is oriented. So it's worth mentioning if you come across this, even if it's not a squiggly line, if it's a straight line, because there's ones for that too. When you see an up arrow specifically in the tablature, you're actually strumming down. If that's not intuitive to you, which for most people it would not be, then think about the way the arrow passes through the strings of the tab. The first string that you actually hit is the fourth string, right? So if this was guitar, it'd be your sixth string. You hit the string on the physical top, but you're actually strumming these one at a time, right? So even if it was a regular strum, technically. So something to keep in mind. It's a little confusing, I know, but this actually means a downstroke. And then just the same if I went back to my addition palette and I used the down arrow, it's down in the tab, but physically when you play it, you actually do an upstroke. All right, so if that's a little confusing, don't worry about it. It's not really going to affect too much how we tab this out. I just want you to be aware. So let's keep going. We'll go a little faster now that we're just dealing with some notes here. So third fret, first fret, both quarter notes. Just going to move over. So third fret, first fret. All right, and then we've got another 3-2. Now, since I do have the same thing here, I'm going to highlight, Control C to copy, and paste, Control V. All right, and then we have another one of these chords. So again, it's different rhythm, but I could save some time by highlighting that, Control C to copy. Oops. And then Control V, paste. Now, if you saw a bunch of shortcuts happening there, what I was doing, I think this is the first time I've done it in front of the camera here, is I was hitting Control or holding Control and then hitting my arrow keys. And what that will actually do is it will jump to the first beat of any measure. And I can hit the back key as well. So if I hold down Control and hit the back key, it will jump to the first beat of each of those measures. So it's a very quick way to get through your music. You won't see me use it very often here because normally we're going to the next beat, then the next beat. We aren't jumping measures. So let's go ahead and get rid of these extra measures I don't need at the moment just by highlighting and Control Delete. So for example, I'm just going to hit right on the arrow key. Actually, we need to change that to an eighth note. So let's go back and change that to an eighth note by hitting the minus key. Okay. Now we're going to do a pull off to the second fret here. So always do, in my opinion, it's better to do the number first. So I'm going to move over and type in 2. I'm going to go back to the chord and hit H. Now, if that's an unintuitive keyboard shortcut for you, H is short for hammer-on, and the opposite of a hammer-on is a pull-off. There's not a separate key for pull-off, so hammer-ons and pull-offs are always going to be H. 3-1. Okay, another copy-paste. So I'm just going to copy these, exact same rhythm. I'm going to keep going to my next beat, Control-V to paste, and let's go to the next measure. All right, so we're halfway done. And at this point, as you've already seen, we can copy and paste quite a bit, right? So again, I can copy and paste this again. I've got a slightly different rhythm here, and I don't have the little squiggly arrow. So we're going to get rid of that in a second. But let's go ahead and just copy and paste this part. Okay. Now, you could leave the arrow. It doesn't make that big of a difference, but I'm going to get rid of it by simply opening that addition palette after highlighting it, and click that, and then remove. That should get rid of that. Okay, so we need a dot on this quarter note, so that's really simple. Just hit period. That'll add a dot. Moving over. What do we have next? We have another chord here. So again, 2 ways to do it, tab, or you could open the diagram editor. So I'm going to do it the tab way, because that's my favorite way to do chords like this especially. 3-5. Hit A. Opens up the chord diagram. All right, that looks pretty good. Actually, I do want these fingers, so I'm just gonna hit enter or OK. And then we're gonna change the rhythm to an eighth note. So it's got a dot in there because the last one was a dot. So we're gonna get rid of the dot by pressing the period button, and then eighth note minus key. Moving over. Got another 3/5. So actually what we could have done is could have stayed there and then just hit C, then plus for the quarter note. And then we're going to tie that to another one of these. Now, here's something that'll happen. I want to go to the next measure, but the shortcut C will simply add another one of these. So here's what happens. If I hit C, it's going to stay in the same measure, even though I don't need any more beats in here. So the way that that behaves is not going to work. So I can't do that. Let's get rid of that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to copy and paste. So copy, move over, paste. And then now I can add my tie. So a quick way I could add the tie is to hit L on my keyboard shortcuts, which is my preference. I like to just highlight, hit L. But let's say I didn't know that. For any of the symbols that you need, it's usually going to be in that addition palette. So top left-hand corner, it's this little left menu. All right. So if you've got good eyesight, you can eventually find it. Oh, there it is right there. Okay, cool. So you can see why shortcuts are a lot nicer. They're a lot quicker if you just learn the shortcut. L for ties. All right. All right, so now let's make sure that we got the right rhythm. So we want that to be an eighth note. Move over. Got another chord here, but it's different, 3/7. So 3 and 7. And that's an eighth note, we're good there. And then we've got one last chord. Now these look really similar. This just adds an open to it, right? So quickest way to do this would be to hit C to simply copy that beat. And then we're gonna add the 0 to it. And then we're going to correct the rhythm by hitting the plus key until we get to a half note and hit the period for dotted half note. And then that completes our measure. And then you guessed it, we got a squiggly line. So we're going to add the squiggly line by going over into our menu again. And unfortunately, there's no shortcut for this, is there? Oh yeah, there is a shortcut. Okay, so I don't use this one very often. Control Shift D. Let's do it that way. Control Shift D. Look at that. Cool. And then again, this only applies if you're changing how it sounds. If you don't care, if you just want the look of it, then just okay. Cool. All right, now there's a couple differences in the way these look, right? We've got 2 measures on top, 2 measures on bottom. So if you want to keep consistent with that, you can by going over to the last measure you want to see on the top line. So the last measure I want to see on the top line is the second measure. I'm just going to go to the last beat here. And I'm going to hit Control, Enter. And what that does is it stretches that end of that measure to the right side of the page. All right. Now I could go down here and I could fix the last measure here the same way because it's going to look all weird like this. So Control Enter stretches it out. Now, something that might bother you if you're a little OCD like me is you'll notice that the measure lines on the top for measure 2 here does not line up vertically with 4. If that really bothers you, you could just hit Control Alt D and you can play with these triangles to try to match them up. Unfortunately, there's no like snap like you have in a lot of programs where they snap into a grid, but you could get it pretty close by eye. I mean, that looks pretty good. And then Control Alt D to get rid of that again. All right, there we go. Pretty good here. And I've got my title. I could add my artist if I wanted to. I've got a couple of the chords up here, but not all 3. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to add those. Looks like I'm missing this one at the end. So we're going to go ahead and add that one. Now, what's going to happen is if I add it right here, it's only going to show those 2 notes. And the full chord has this open in there. So I might instead of doing 2 separate chord diagrams for this, it's basically just this one right here, right? So I'm going to add the open to this. Now it's just a typical sounding looking chord. It's C, you know, it's a different way to play C. And then I'm going to tell this is going to be pinky actually. That is a good looking ukulele tab. I hope this helped. Good luck.